let's talk about the story that is dominating the headlines, dominating the conversation on Twitter and X.com or wherever you get your hockey news. It's the 3-game suspensions given out to Tyler Myers and Connor McDavid. Matching suspensions. I kind of felt like from the jump, it made sense for the Department of Player Safety to just say, both you cross-checked someone in the head, you're both getting 3 games. As we talked about yesterday, I thought like maybe a case for Myers to get more because it was unprovoked, but also the McDavid reaction to just a minor penalty was clearly over the top. I also thought it could have been 2 games each. You could have said, hey, neither of you are playing in the rematch, then forget about it. You don't play for a while. But what did you make of 3 apiece?
So I didn't have any issue with the suspensions being matching length. To your point, a cross-check to the face is a cross-check to the face. However, I felt like for both players, this was 1 game too many. And I'll take it back to some of the commentary that I had yesterday. There needs to be more accountability for the officials on the ice. There was a wrestling match in the middle of the slot for 20 seconds prior to the cross-check to the face. No one is absolving Connor McDavid of that. Not by any stretch. You cross-check someone in the jibs and you're getting suspended. No ifs, ands, or buts. However, he shouldn't have needed to take justice into his own hands because he was being mauled by Connor Garland, whose entire thought process is, hey, if I could just wrestle with the best player in the world for the last 10 seconds of the game, then I'm going to ensure a Vancouver Canucks victory. Why that wasn't a thought process, and I'm not saying just Garland, both players, even up, take him off the ice. Yet they let them play, and we hear nothing. No explanation, nothing since, no chatter about it. And then to get to the Department of Player Safety part of it, I just think this suspension, to me, this cross-check to the face is no different than so many others which have received 2 games. And the closest comparable to me is Austin Matthews in the outdoor game against Rasmus Dahlin. Just as vicious, just as retaliatory, just as unacceptable. And yet Matthews gets 2 and McDavid gets 3. And the thought process of that is, well, because McDavid has a previous suspension history, never mind that it was 5+ years ago, never mind that it didn't involve a stick. Because of that, excuse me, therefore, we run into a spot where McDavid ratchets from a 2-game suspension to 3. There's not much of the process that I agree with. And I think the disappointing part, to add another layer to it, is that it's entirely a waste of time and resources to even bother appealing, because the suspension will be served by then. And what you could only hope to get if somehow the commissioner were to go against his own employees would be a 1-game reduction, which would result in $65,000 back in your pocket.
Yeah. We've talked about this a bunch, and I know it's not like it's a pretty common take to kind of have, but the idea of like, hey, can we make officials available post game to explain it, and not to put officials on blast, not to have a reporter sit in a room and grill them, but to use it as an education tool. And then you just talked, and you talked about this earlier in the season with the David Perron thing as well. Like, or sorry, maybe it was last year. Sorry, with the David Perron thing, like the appeal process is so wildly broken. Is this anything that you think the league itself has a want to correct, or is this something the players are eventually going to have to push for in a CBA?
I think it's absolutely has to come down to the players. You need a more expedient process, and you need B, a completely independent process. How often is the commissioner, who I am 100% certain had eyes on this suspension before it went out and essentially tacitly approves it, why is it that the same person that's kind of approving it on the way out the door is then going to be the arbitrator involved in making a ruling as to whether or not the appeal should stand? I think they would have a lot of ammo to look at that exact same cross-check to the head from Austin Matthews and say, how does this rise to any different level than the Connor McDavid one from the other night? I just don't see a difference, and that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. And the other conversation, like we talked about officiating, you and Jason talked about officiating yesterday on the DFO rundown. We shared the stats. Connor McDavid, 197th in penalties drawn per 60 minutes. When you look at the 4 years before this one, he was right up there near the top of the league. He actually drew the most penalties in the league. the idea that this 3-game suspension is some sort of a shot at Connor McDavid or some sort of indication of how unfairly he's treated, I don't think they're connected. Like, I don't think you can look at this. You can't look at this 3-game suspension and be like, God, the NHL doesn't protect its stars. Like, no, he cross-checked someone in the head. You get suspended. Is it a game too much? Sure. The argument of the refs don't call McDavid the correct way or star players in general the correct way, that is also correct. Both are correct, but they're separate issues, Frank. The idea that the NHL shouldn't suspend Connor McDavid because he's Connor McDavid is just, you're out to lunch if you think that. If you think he should skip the 4 nations because he got a 3-game suspension, he cross-checked someone in the face. That deserves discipline.
Yeah, and I agree on all those points, and I think it's really well said in that these are 2 separate things. Accountability for officiating is over here, and process and punishment from Department of Player Safety is over there. Like 2 completely separate departments. They're not even housed in the same headquarters. It's totally separate. And aside from that, this whole notion that, oh, Connor McDavid's going to suddenly act differently, that's not in his nature. And anyone suggesting 4 nations face-off, skipping that, you obviously don't know Connor McDavid, because that would not be bailing on the NHL shield. That would be bailing on your country.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.